The first strawberry blossom Tessa Morgan turned over that morning looked healthy until she saw the center. It had gone black. She checked the next flower, then the next. Above her, the row cover snapped in the cold wind. Most of the plants near the packing shed still held white petals and yellow centers. Along the far edge of the field, though, the damage formed a narrow band. Black centers, soft petals, row after row. The dead blossoms began almost exactly where the old tree line had stood 3 weeks earlier. Tessa straightened and looked across the property boundary. With the trees gone, she could see the 3 new cabins on Mason Creel's ridge for the first time. Their unfinished windows caught the early light. So did the pale stumps his crew had left behind. Her phone buzzed inside her coat. Lori Kemp, the produce manager at Mountain Market, was supposed to call in less than an hour. Lori needed a firm estimate for the first May strawberry order. That order paid for fertilizer, summer seed, and most of the June lease payment. Behind Tessa, her 8-year-old son leaned out of the truck. "Mom, the bus comes in 12 minutes. "I know. You said that before." Tessa took pictures of the damaged rows. The line was too sharp to ignore. She called Mason before she called Lori. He answered after several rings. "Tessa, you need to come down here. I'm already on the ridge. Then it won't take long." "What happened?" She looked at the blackened blossoms and the open space where the trees had been. "You cut away the one thing standing between this field and the cold." Mason did not answer immediately. Then he said, "That's a pretty big conclusion before breakfast." By the time Tessa got Ben onto the school bus, her 13-year-old daughter had texted 3 times asking where Ben's blue jacket was. Tessa found it beneath a stack of empty berry flats in the mudroom. A permission slip she had forgotten to sign was folded inside one sleeve. She signed it against the wall with the carpenter pencil she kept in her coat pocket. Avery entered the kitchen wearing one sock and carrying her shoes. "You made coffee," she said. Tessa glanced at the mug beside the sink. "I did. You didn't drink it. I'm getting to it. It's cold. I know what cold is this morning." Avery looked through the window toward the strawberry field. "Did the berries freeze?" "Some flowers did." "How many?" "I don't know yet." "Is that bad?" Tessa picked up the mug, took one swallow, and set it down again. "It means I have work to do." Avery tied one shoe without looking away from her. That had not been an answer, and they both knew it. The Carver farm covered 11 acres in Henderson County, North Carolina, though only 7 were useful for crops. Tessa grew strawberries on 4 acres of raised plastic-covered beds and rotated vegetables through the remaining ground as the season warmed. She sold berries at a roadside stand, delivered produce to 2 restaurants, and held one contract large enough to make the numbers behave. The farmhouse came with the land lease. So did the packing shed, the cracked gravel lane, and the old line of trees along the neighboring ridge. Tessa owned the compact tractor, the drip lines, the cooling unit she had bought used, and every roll of row cover stacked in the barn. She did not own the ground beneath any of it. Her 3-year lease had 8 months left. Judith Carver, the landowner, had promised to discuss renewal after strawberry season. Recently, though, Judith had started using phrases like, "keeping my options open." At 9:30, Lori called. Tessa stood beside the wash table with a notebook open in front of her. "How bad is it?" Lori asked. "The upper blocks are mostly fine. I'm still counting the edge rows. Can you fill the first order?" "I think so." "You think so? Or you can?" Tessa rubbed a thumb across a coffee stain on the paper. "I can give you a real number by Friday. I need backup fruit lined up before then." "I understand. I like your berries, Tessa. But liking them doesn't keep a shelf full." "I said I understand." She heard the edge in her own voice. Lori went quiet for a moment. "Friday morning," she said. "After that, I buy somewhere else." When the call ended, Judith phoned. "I heard there was frost damage," she said. "News travels faster than weather." Mason called me. "Of course he did." Judith paused. He also raised his offer. Tessa stopped writing. "What offer?" "For the strip beside your house and the lower lane." Tessa looked through the open packing shed door. The gravel lane passed within yards of the farmhouse before climbing toward the ridge. "You told me you weren't selling." "I told you I had not decided. If you sell that strip, construction trucks will pass the packing shed all day. I know where the lane is." The sharpness in Judith's reply made Tessa regret her tone. Judith continued more quietly. "I'm 67. The taxes went up again. The barn roof needs work. You're asking me for another lease, and Mason is offering cash now. I can make this farm pay. That is what we are trying to find out." Mason arrived before lunch in a white pickup with mud only on the tires. He walked through the damaged rows without stepping on the plastic. That irritated Tessa more than carelessness would have. It meant he knew enough to understand what he was looking at. He crouched beside a dead blossom. "Frost," he said. "I know what frost looks like. Half the county had it. Not in a line." He stood and looked toward the stumps. "You asked for those trees to be trimmed. I asked you to cut back the limbs shading the beds. You said you needed more afternoon light. I did not say clear the whole line." Mason took out his phone and opened an old message. He had saved her exact words. "Trim back the limbs blocking the afternoon light. That would help me." Tessa remembered writing it in February while unloading seed trays. She had meant branches. Mason had heard permission. "You cut trees on Judith's side," she said. "You don't know where the boundary is." "Neither do you. I use the old markers. Old markers move. So do row covers." He pointed to a section where the fabric had pulled loose overnight. Tessa felt heat rise behind her face. "That cover was secure when I left. Then the wind got underneath it. The wind got underneath it because there is nothing there anymore." Mason looked back at the damaged beds. "That may be true, but it is not the same as knowing." She hated the sentence because it was reasonable. He offered to buy her 2 new rolls of row cover. In return, he wanted her to stop telling buyers that his tree work had damaged the crop. "That is not help," she said. "That is buying silence cheap. It is buying equipment you admit failed." She stepped closer. "Those trees came down, and this field froze in their place." Mason's expression tightened. "Do you have temperature readings from last night?" Tessa did not answer. "That's what I thought." By late afternoon, Lori called again. Someone had repeated Tessa's accusation at the feed store. Mountain Market was removing the farm's name from its spring advertisement until the dispute was settled. "We are not canceling the order," Lori said. "I just cannot put the store in the middle of this." Tessa hung up and washed the same stack of berry flats twice. Dr. Priya Shah from the county extension office arrived the next morning in a faded green jacket and repaired work boots. She moved slowly through the beds, turning flowers over, lifting row cover, and checking the slope of the field. "The damage is real," Priya said. "Thank you. That was never the uncertain part." Tessa folded her arms. Priya pointed to 2 neighboring beds. "This section lost more flowers. The one beside it lost fewer. Same distance from the old tree line. The cover held better there. Which matters. The trees matter too. Probably. Probably does not help me. It helps more than certainty we have not earned." Priya studied the opening toward the ridge. "People talk about frost as though it behaves one simple way," she said. "It doesn't. Sometimes trees block wind. Sometimes they trap cold air. Sometimes shade delays bloom. Sometimes the worst damage happens where the most flowers were open." Tessa looked down the dark line in the crop. "So what can you tell me?" "I can tell you the field changed after the trees came down. I can tell you part of your cover failed. I can tell you we need better information before we decide which change mattered most." Priya had brought 2 temperature sensors. Tessa already owned one, though she had kept it in the center beds because that was where it was easiest to check. They placed one near the former tree line, one in the center block, and one lower on the slope. Then they mapped the damaged flowers. That evening, Tessa gave Lori a reduced crop estimate. Mountain Market cut the first order by 1/3. The number was not large enough to ruin her. It was large enough to make every other bill harder. For 3 nights, Tessa checked the sensors before bed and again before sunrise. The readings refused to give her the answer she wanted. The edge was not always the coldest part of the field. One afternoon it warmed faster than the center beds. On one calm night, the lowest corner held cold air longer. On another, the temperature near the open boundary dropped quickly and then recovered. The dead flowers had formed a clean line. The cause did not. On the fourth evening, Tessa sat at the kitchen table with 3 years of crop notebooks spread around her. Ben worked on multiplication beside a feed invoice he was using as scrap paper. Avery scrolled through pictures on her phone. Tessa compared bloom dates. The beds beside the old trees had always started later. Sometimes only by a few days. Some years, less than that. She had complained about those beds because later flowers meant later berries, and later berries often missed the highest early-season price. This spring, after the trees came down, the delay had disappeared. "Tessa," Avery said. Tessa looked up. Avery rarely used her first name unless she had already asked something twice. "What? Why do you need old pictures of the field?" "I want to see how thick the trees were. I have pictures from Ben's birthday." "Why would those show the trees?" "He chased Mrs. Carver's dog into the strawberry beds." "I remember. You were really mad." "I remember that too." Avery turned the phone around. In the picture, Ben stood beside the old tree line holding a red balloon. Behind him, late afternoon shadow reached across the first several beds. The trees were thicker than Tessa remembered. Another picture showed the trimming crew at the beginning of the job. Several trunks were already on the ground. The date was visible in the phone. Priya returned the next morning. They placed the pictures beside the crop notebooks on the wash table. Priya traced the old shadow line with one finger. "These beds used to warm later in the afternoon," she said. "So the trees protected them." "Slow down." Tessa pressed her lips together. "The shade may have delayed development," Priya continued. "After the trees were removed, these plants could have reached open bloom earlier. When the cold arrived, more flowers were vulnerable. And the wind? It may have made the exposed edge harder to protect. The loose cover still matters." Tessa stared at the records. The trees had not formed a wall that stopped frost. They had changed the timing of the crop. Tessa had wanted more sunlight because she wanted earlier berries. She had gotten them. Then the cold arrived. Her phone still held the message Mason had shown her. "Trim back the limbs blocking the afternoon light." She had given him just enough truth to hide behind. Judith came to the farm that afternoon. Tessa could have shown her only the pictures of cut trunks and blackened flowers. Instead, she put the old message on the table too. "I asked for trimming," Tessa said. "I did not ask him to clear the line, but I asked for more light." Judith read the message twice. "And the old row covers? Some failed. Then how much of this is Mason's fault?" "I do not know yet." Judith looked almost disappointed. A simple villain would have made her decision easier too. "What are you asking me to do?" Judith said. "Pause the sale. Hire a surveyor. Tell Mason not to remove the stumps until we know where the property line is. And if the trees were his, then they were his. And if they were mine, then we talk about replacing them." Judith studied her. "You are asking me to spend money because you are uncertain. I am offering to pay part of it because I am uncertain." That hurt to say. The farm account was already thin. Judith agreed. The next morning, machinery started on the ridge before 7. Tessa drove up the lane and found a small excavator pulling roots from the ground. Mason stood beside it. "Judith told you to stop. She told me she wanted a survey. She told you not to remove anything. These stumps are on my land. You do not know that." He pointed toward 2 faded stakes in the weeds. "There is your line." One leaned toward the field. The other stood several yards from the old fence. "Those are not a survey. They are older than both of us. That does not make them right." Mason folded his arms. "My loan schedule does not stop because you changed your mind about sunlight." He gave Judith a written offer that afternoon. It expired in 12 days. He also offered Tessa enough money for new row cover and part of her lost crop if she signed a statement saying the tree work had caused no proven damage. For nearly an hour, she considered it. The money would carry her through June. It would not give her a farm next year. The surveyor needed a deposit, and Tessa did not have enough, so she opened a limited number of summer vegetable shares to her roadside customers. She wrote the announcement carefully. No promises about the dispute, no emotional story, just a list of what she expected to grow and a clear note that weather could change the contents. By the end of the day, 12 customers had signed up. One woman sent a message. "Will pickup still be at the farm next year?" Tessa left it unanswered until morning. The survey took 6 days. Dean Holloway located 2 buried markers and walked the old deed description without offering an opinion about anyone's behavior. Several stumps stood on Mason's side. More stood on Judith's. The result gave Tessa leverage, but not the clean victory she had imagined. There was no single straight line proving Mason had taken the entire tree row. The truth wandered back and forth across the boundary. Mason challenged one of the markers and argued that most of the crop loss still came from failed covers. He was not entirely wrong. Then the forecast showed another late, cold event. Judith's sale deadline was 2 days away. Lori needed to know whether Mountain Market could restore part of the May order. Tessa had enough good row cover for the flowering beds, but not enough for every acre. Eric agreed to take the children one night earlier than scheduled. Avery stood in the mudroom holding her overnight bag. "Are we moving?" she asked. "Not tonight." "That is not what I asked." Tessa looked at her daughter and realized that silence had not protected either child. It had only made them listen harder. "I do not know if we will stay after this lease." Avery looked toward the field. "Do you want to?" "Yes." "Is that the same as it being smart?" Tessa almost laughed. It sounded like a question she would ask someone else. "No," she said. "It isn't." Ben entered carrying one of the metal row cover clips. "Can I keep this?" "No." "Why?" "Because it belongs to the farm." He placed it on the bench. Tessa added, "I am trying to make sure the next decision lasts longer than one season." The children left with Eric before sunset. A small group of summer share customers helped Tessa pull cover across the flowering beds. There were no speeches. One woman left early for work. A retired teacher fastened several clips backward until Priya corrected her. 2 people argued about which roll belonged on the upper block. By dark, the important beds were covered. The cold came with more wind than the first one. At 3 in the morning, Tessa walked the field with a flashlight, tightening clips wherever the fabric lifted. She could hear construction plastic snapping on Mason's ridge. By sunrise, her hands were numb. The second cold event caused less damage. Not none. The properly covered beds held. The open edge showed wider temperature swings, especially where wind found a way under the fabric. The lowest corner stayed cold longer than the rest. The readings did not prove the trees had been a perfect shield. They showed that the field now behaved differently. They also showed that better cover and a different planting plan could reduce the risk. The meeting took place 2 days later beside the remaining stumps. Judith held a folder against her chest. Mason brought his project manager. Priya carried the temperature charts. Dean brought the survey. Tessa brought her crop notebooks. No one raised a voice. Dean explained which stump stood on which parcel. Priya explained what the plant records and temperature readings supported and what they did not. Tessa laid out the photographs and the old message. "I asked for more light," she said. "That part is mine. I did not give permission to clear Judith's trees. My old cover made the damage worse. That is mine too." Mason shifted his weight. "So, we agree the crop loss is not entirely my responsibility." "Yes." The answer surprised him. Tessa continued. "We also agree your crew removed trees you did not own." Judith opened Dean's survey. Mason glanced at his project manager, then handed Judith another proposal. His company would increase its offer for the land strip. He would make a separate payment to Tessa if she signed the release and ended her lease after harvest. For a few seconds, the numbers tempted her. The payment would clear her short-term debt. She could move closer to Asheville. The children would live nearer their father. She would no longer wake before dawn calculating whether the weather had changed the grocery budget. But the money would buy one exit. It would not buy another farm. Tessa placed the proposal on the hood of Judith's car. I am not asking you to pay for every damaged flower, she said. I am asking for something that still works 3 years from now. She gave them her terms. Mason would pay most of the cost of temporary wind screening and a mixed replacement tree row on Judith's side. Tessa would replace her oldest row cover on a schedule she could afford. Judith would renew the lease for 3 years and keep the disputed access strip out of the sale during that time. Any future tree work along the boundary would require written approval and a current survey. Mason frowned. You are asking me to pay for trees that will help her business. I am asking you to replace trees your crew removed from land you did not own. They will take years to mature. I know. Then they do nothing for this season. No, Tessa said. Nothing fixes this season. That was the part none of them could negotiate away. Judith looked toward the farmhouse, and then toward the cabins. If I sell the strip before this is settled, she said, I inherit the argument. Mason rubbed a hand across his jaw. His cabins were already framed. A boundary dispute could delay the project longer than planting trees would. He agreed to most of Tessa's terms, not all. The temporary screening would protect only the most exposed section. Tessa would pay more toward the new trees than she wanted. Mason refused to admit that the clearing had caused the first frost loss. Tessa signed anyway. The agreement protected the next 3 seasons. An admission would not have. Mountain Market restored part of the order, though not all of it. The first picking was smaller than Tessa had planned. She sold imperfect berries at the roadside stand and used the softest fruit for jam. Judith signed the new lease inside the packing shed. Mason's crew installed the temporary screen without saying much to Tessa. The replacement trees arrived in early June, young enough to look almost foolish beside the old stumps. One morning before the school bus came, Avery tied weatherproof labels to the new plantings. Ben measured the spacing, lost count, and started again from the wrong end. Tessa moved 3 stakes away from the straight line the installers had marked. The ground dipped there, and a rigid row would have ignored the way water and cold settled across the field. Isn't it supposed to be straight? Avery asked. Only if the land is. Tessa looked toward the beds that had taken the worst damage. Next year, she would not put the earliest strawberries there. She would plant something that tolerated the cold and reserve the warmer block for the fruit that paid the spring bills. The new trees would take years to matter. The lease would last 3. For the first time in months, that felt like enough time to make a real decision.